You know, this is a very special video for me. A few years ago, I put together a comparison video that really transformed the channel to what it is now, and that was a C200 versus Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K video. Well, now today, we get the continuation of that legacy. What's up everybody, James Jackson here, back again with another video. If you're new to my channel, I do tips, tricks, news, and reviews for the film and video making industry. So if you do like the content here, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that bell so you can stay up to date on all the content going forth. As the title mentioned, we got the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro and the Canon EOS C70. These two are probably the most interesting cameras to come out in the past year. I've got a chance to tamper with the Pocket 6K Pro for a little bit, and I've been an owner of the C70 for a little bit over, I guess, what, 6 months now? And I've been loving the camera ever since I acquired it. And I brought up that video before of the Pocket 4K versus C200 because that video really helped set off this channel and really got things going. And it's interesting because there were flaws with both cameras, but in this video where we got these two cameras, it appears both companies have addressed a lot of the issues that we had with those two predecessor cameras in these two cameras. In the case of the C70, we have a 10-bit codec. Now, obviously, unfortunately, we don't have RAW, but we do have a 10-bit codec that is able to work with relatively easy media cards and an amazing sensor that delivers unmatchable dynamic range. And then we have the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro that addresses a lot of most of the concerns that we have, including some sort of movable screen, built-in NDs being the big ones, and additional help to the battery life. But most of the internal compartments that made the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K great are still there. Pretty much all of them are still there. So where do these cameras now sit, especially given the fact that the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro is less than half the cost of the C70. So I have been doing tests and comparisons to them. I've compared the different image qualities with them and how, workflow and the works. So like before, let's get started. So I would like to start off with, of course, image quality. Because image quality is the thing that we cinematographers and filmmakers, we always talk about as the most important feature, which, for the most part is true. So we, of course, got to talk about it again. And this time it's very interesting compared to the previous comparisons of the predecessors of these cameras. Because in my previous video, I basically said the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K had the better image quality in terms of a better codec with its 12-bit Cinema DNG and Blackmagic RAW at the time of that recording that. And then, but more importantly, it had the better codec option with ProRes, which offered a 10-bit, which the C200 only offered an 8-bit as an alternative to its RAW option. And then it was just this. The Pocket 4K was better in low light than the C200. So those were things that came up. But a lot has now changed. This one now is a 6K sensor that offers a plentiful, beautiful options, including still Blackmagic RAW and still a really, great dynamic range. But now we got the C70 that offers probably Canon's, not probably, it is Canon's best sensor to date, which is the DGO sensor. Originally that came from the C300 Mark III that now trickled down to the Canon C70, which sports supposedly 16.5 plus stops of dynamic range, but that's specs. What's reality like? And this is where it got the most interesting, which is in terms of dynamic range. So If you saw my short that I put out before, I said I found something very interesting with the dynamic range test that I did of these two cameras. And long story short, I found out that in terms of highlights, the dynamic range latitude of the highlights were about the same for both. However, the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro reproduced the better color output straight out of the camera over the C70, which makes sense. This was shooting 12-bit RAW. This was only shooting a compressed 10-bit 422 long GOT recording. So the colors were going to be the same. But what was the more interesting point was that the highlight roll-off, which in terms of how smooth the highlight goes up to the clipping point, it was glaring that the C70 was superior in the highlight roll-off over the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. So Pocket Cinema Camera 6K reproduced better colors, but in terms of a latitude into the highlights, I personally saw and through multiple tests, I found out that the C70 produced the better highlights. But what was more important that most people don't really talk about, because everybody likes talking about highlights, the shadow recovery of the C70 was vastly superior than the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. The amount of wiggle room you have in the shadows was it was night and day. There was a clear advantage to the C70. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is James Jackson. I'm putting a pause on this video sort of to just give some clarity on the discussion of dynamic range, as this kind of got into a little bit of a debate with me and one of my followers. I want to just say I love all my followers, and I especially love my follower Lee Brandt. He's been a follower of me for quite a few times. Me and him got in a little debate on the terms of the dynamic range, and I want to just personally apologize to Lee for the simple fact that I don't think I was communicating what I was seeing properly. So when we had the discussion during, if from my live stream video when I was going over everything, so I'm going to try to give you guys a little bit more clarity as based on what Lee was trying to talk about, which was the fact that in regards to the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K and the 6K Pro, you basically shoot at 400, but you drop it to ISO 100, and you can use highlight recovery and get things back. And the part I'm trying to say I wasn't effectively communicating was the process he was showing, and he actually did a video about it too, to sort of show what he was talking about. The process I was doing was essentially the same thing, and I think I need to sort of clarify basically how the dynamic range, on why I'm basically still getting the same results. So what we're going and also just so, because one of the things that was talked about is what is the color space that we're working with. So I'll show you the color space. Basically DaVinci Resolve YRGB color manage, and I'm using DaVinci Wide Gamut because this is going to give you the best performance out of any of your camera settings solely on this. This will provide it. Now when you do this, this will automatically make take any raw format, it's going to automatically convert it to 709. Now you can do it like I have here on my C70 image. You can change the input space and just put it in. In this case, it was Canon Cinema Gamut, Canon Log 2. Let's go into what Lee was essentially referring to. So what Lee is referring to is that if we were to do here, and like I said, I put it here intentionally to clip the highlights on this area here based on the sun, but I wanted to see how we would with shadows. Now, what Lee was referring to is that, hey, we shot at ISO 400. If we were to drop this to 100, and then we get all this, now we can add highlight recovery. Oh, we got that back. So, which is true. You pull this and you pull it back. Here's the thing that is not really discussed, is you're not really getting dynamic range back. Keep in mind that when you change ISO 400 to ISO 100, you are effectively changing the gamma curve as well. So it means that you're actually shifting the gamma curve more into the shadows. So you're not gaining stops of latitude in the highlights. Instead, what you're doing is you're just reshifting it to the shadows, and then all you're doing with the highlight recovery is gaining the highlights that were already there. So you're not gaining anything. Now, so we could do that, and then let's go to what he did here, which was the global. And then let's just raise the exposure up. All right, we raised the exposure up. But here's the problem, here comes the problem, especially when you got a very contrasty, when you're not doing something like exposure to the right, which is something sometimes a lot of people do to compensate, is they overexpose to make sure none of the shadows are clipping, and basically when they drop it. But when you're dealing with a situation here, what you'll see is that you're not adding anything, you're not getting any additional information back. In fact, you kind of crushed your shadows a bit too much, and now you'll see, like here on the tree, there's a lot of chromatic information, a lot of chromatic noise on this tree, and you'll see when I move off to a little bit over, that all that information in that bush is gone. It's black. There's nothing there. So even though you can put more, you're moving more stuff in the highlights, if you've already clipped your shadows before, just like you clip your highlights, you're not going to get them back. Had I simply just shot at ISO 400, even if again, he was talking about the highlight recovery, that was just me testing it. But if you look here, for doing this, the noise is cleaner here, and there's more information in this part here. If you drop down to 100, you're losing all of that. So because you're crushing all your shadow information into it in order to try to pull something back. This only works so that type of tactic only works if you are using an ETTR strategy of exposing to the right or overexposing, and then using the raw to drop it down. It still doesn't attain to the same problem. And the same problem is this, is that even if you get more dynamic range in the highlights, the issue is here, as you'll see in the waveform. You go up, and then at some point, there is a point where the pocket cameras hit this brick wall, and it just shoots up. And if we even go back, if we do the same thing, we go down here, we drop this down, and we get that highlight, again, we're gonna pull this, and then let's say we pull this up to try to get it back. It still doesn't address that you hit this wall and it shoots up. It's like you just hit this wall here. And here's what I was referring to in terms of the C70. Look at the roll-off of the C70 going into the highlights. I'll say this, the roll-off is smoother. Yes, it's still clipping. In fact, it's clipping around the same point as the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro. Even using the ISO 100 strategy, it's clipping at the same point. So you're getting about the same amount of dynamic highlights, but the difference is the roll-off. And you can see the roll-off slowly smooths in to the clipping point. But the bigger point of what I was trying to address is that if you look here, we got all this information on the trees. Let's see if once you see that when I move, we got all this information in the bush right here and here. So all the information that was gone in the Pocket Cinema camera, all that information that was gone in the Pocket Cinema camera, it's all here. And I'll show it again here. You can see it hits a wall, but let's do that ISO 100 and just drop it down. Let's get that highlight recovery. Do you get a little bit smooth? Yes, but then watch what happens when we try to just pull this information up to try to get it back to where it was. It's the same thing. You still have that roll off. And even if we not do the Glober thing and we go to and I'll move myself out of the way so you can see, even if we were to just bring up the exposure like here, and we just bring the exposure up, you're still getting this harsh roll off. Compared if we go to put everything back and reset everything here, compared to the C70. Now let's look at the C70, and you'll see, let's get a good shot here. Look at this, people. You see this? And actually, let's just move this, and I'll go to the other side. So Look at this. Look at this roll off into the highlights. It's very smooth. It clips. They're both going to clip because I designed them specifically to clip. But we still have a smooth roll off to the clipping. It's not just doom, and then shoots straight up. There is a smooth roll off on the C70 when shooting on the C70 compared to the 6K. And let's get the spot where the sun's in between the tree. And you still see here, it's just a harsh, and then it hits. But the more important thing is if we blow this up and we see there's a lot of information gone on this tree when we're backlit. And then if we go to the C70, look at this. All this information is here in the shadows. All of it's here. So I just wanted to pause that for a minute. And I want to just thank Lee because I think this was a very interesting discussion. And of course, if I'm sure he's going to be watching this video. So if you have thoughts and opinions, man, definitely leave your comments in the section so we can discuss it. I also, for everybody else, please leave your comments in the discussion if you have any other questions. But let's get back to the regular scheduled video. In terms of codec, this still goes to the Pocket Cinema camera 6K Pro. I mean, it's ProRes and it's 12-bit RAW. This maximum output can do 10-bit, and it does it in MXF AVC. Now you get the all-I, which is great. It is a really solid codec, and they both work really well in post. And if you want to increase, sort of give yourself a little bit of extra quality with the C70, you can record externally and record ProRes, so you can get a little more workable codec. But there's nothing wrong with the MXF AVC files. They work extremely well in post. I don't have any issues. They work just as well for me in ProRes, whether if it's the all-I or the long GOP. They both work very well editing in DaVinci Resolve. I have no issues color grading, or even color grading, editing, playback, anything. It's still a great codec in the C70, but ProRes and 12-bit RAW still outbeat it. So codec goes to the Pocket Cinema camera 6K. Low light. Low light is a lot more interesting with these two cameras. Similar to the dynamic range, the Pocket Cinema camera 6K reproduces better colors overall. Again, we're talking about 12-bit RAW, and the dual native ISO helps the Pocket Cinema camera 6K with its low light performance. However, the C70's dual gain output sensor, which reads these two circuits simultaneously and sends it to the sensor at once, regardless of the ISO, means that you can still reproduce great quality colors at high ISO performances. And the noise floor is so good on the C70 that it after 3200 ISO, the C70 completely destroys it in terms of noise handling, which, by the way, there is no noise reduction done at all on the C70 by default. So in terms of low light performance, it goes to the C70. Now let's get into the ergonomics, and this is where, again, Blackmagic has really made a lot of improvements in these areas. The best place right now is definitely the screen. It's articulating. You can move it up, you can move it down. And the thing is, it's extremely bright, and it's very clear to get the shots you need, even in very bright sunlight areas. Whereas the C70 does have a bright screen, and it is fully articulating, but the screen is not as bright as the Pocket Cinema camera 6K. Also, the bigger screen just makes it a lot more easier to view compared to the 3-inch screen that is on the C70. So in terms of screen build, and also just the hinge, this is probably one of the things that everybody complains, and rightfully so. The hinge is not necessarily reliable. This is sturdy. This right here is completely sturdy. You don't have to worry about it going anywhere. So in terms of screen build quality capabilities, goes to the Pocket Cinema camera 6K. Let's go to the other ergonomics. Built-in NDs. You now get 6 stops of NDs in here. Unfortunately, I found myself in way too many situations where that was still not enough to shoot, especially if I wanted to shoot really wide open on something like a Sigma 18-35. Whereas the C70, you can have it go up to 10 stops of NDs, which gives me just enough what I need. in order to put the built-in NDs on there. And also just the layout and the design of the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. It's just there's so much weight now on this side. It's very awkward to hold. Whereas the C70, because of how it's designed, even though this is also big and it's pretty good, because the center of gravity is like right here, and you can sort of see it. What it's easier to do is now you can do something like this, especially when you got the recommended top handle. You can use this. So now this is a point of contact. Your arm is a point of contact, and then you put it on the top. This is a point of contact. So this is 3 stops of contact that you could use to give yourself stability for the camera, and it's a lot easier to work with this camera. And the combined fact that you get digital stabilization, this camera just feels a lot more robust. Even though it's not as build quality is as good as some of the C70s, it's still well built. Where this still feel, even though it's carbon composite, it still has a plastic feel to it. In terms of design, body design, and functionalities and build quality, I gotta give it to the C70. The C70, though, I have to say I'm really glad Blackmagic has really made improvements to this camera. Now let's talk about one of the big things everybody had gripe about the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, and that is battery life. We now use Sony MPF batteries compared to the LPE6 batteries, which gave us only maybe 30-45 minutes. It's still not great. You still have to basically, it's going to give you maybe just a little bit under an hour. I'll say 50-55 minutes. I'm still finding myself constantly switching, but even then I can tolerate that. The thing I still cannot tolerate about this camera is the fact of the inaccurate display of how much runtime you have left on your batteries. It's not, I don't feel comfortable trusting that battery life, the battery symbol of how much battery I have left. Whereas the C70, you turn this on, I don't know if you can see this, but you can clearly see when it loads up, you have the minutes right there to tell you. We have 229 minutes. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but let's pull this up. I don't think you'll be able to see it, but it says 229 minutes of record time. And that's because of this battery right here, which as y'all do, if y'all obviously do the math, that is just a little bit under 4 hours of record time. And that is with this not fully charged. This battery will give closer to 5.5 hours. So 50 minutes, 5.5 hours. Now, obviously, this is an additional piece, but it costs just as much as the battery that comes with it. And the battery that comes with it that gives you just about 3 hours of continuous runtime. And the timing on this camera is extremely accurate. So even though, so yes, you can go and buy batteries, but the battery that just comes with it, in order to get the amount of runtime you want, you're going to have to probably get 4 or 5 batteries to compete with the battery that just comes with the C70. And then on top of this, if you add this one additional battery that costs the same as that battery, you are looking at basically having your entire shoot set ready without having to get any additional batteries. So in terms of just battery life, the winner is clearly the C70. One other feature that we got to talk about is the mount. So obviously the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K has an EF mount, the C70 has an RF mount. And I have now started to realize that I really do love the RF mount and the capabilities. One, for the fact that I have the option of shooting on RF lenses if I want to, or I can shoot on EF glass, which I have for both of these cameras right now. But even then, it gives me the option to use something like Canon Speed Booster, Canon's Focal Reducer, sorry, Metabones, to basically give myself a full frame image on the C70. Or I can go PL mount, and I can go with PL glass and use PL glass and get some really professional glass. I really only have one option with the 6K, and that is EF. Yes, there are PL adapters that you can use, but to be honest with you, there's some lenses that may not work with those adapters, so I just don't like running the risk of potentially not being able to use PL lenses if I want to use them. So in terms of the mounts, I have got to once again go with the Canon EOS C70. Let's just wrap up some other small little features. Sound, we have 2 mini XLR inputs, which again I don't have a big deal as some people had with mini XLRs for some reason. I don't know why. It's just like $40 for the cable. Just don't complain about it. Which is great. With the C70, you got 3 sources of audio, so you can use 2 different sources for one XLR mini and a second XLR mini, and then you can still use your 3.5 mini jack and still put in a 3rd source of audio. So if you need a lot of audio sources, the C70 is still better in terms of that compared to the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro. Let's talk about media. Now, I have conflicting views about the medias. On the one hand, positive note, I do like the fact that the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro does use a CFast 2.0 card, so you can actually use those bigger datas and actually get like really robust, high quality codec. Whereas the C70, you use SD cards, which also is one of the reasons why it's limited to not being able to record RAW. However, the benefit of that is you get multiple ways of recording. You can relay record, you can dual record, so you can have a backup, you can record sound separately, you can record a proxy. You can't do that on the Pocket Cinema camera. You have to choose between recording to a CFast card or going to an SSD card. Do not do that. Or you have to choose between going to an SD card, which will really cap the capabilities of what you can record. So really there's only one option, which is and if your CFast card fails, you don't really have an option of doing a backup unless you record to like an external device like the Video Assist from Blackmagic, so which is going to come at additional cost. And then finally, it's just the camera, the C70, just like this, it pretty much comes complete with not really adding any additional features unless you just sort of tweaking to sort of fit your need. Whereas this, you will need some sort of external battery, you will need some sort of focus system because again, no autofocus really, no IBIS, so you're going to have to rig this out. You're still going to buy a lot of stuff for this camera. So in terms of all these additional features, overall I still got to go with the C70. Now, of course, we got to talk about price. $2,500, $5,500. This is a no-brainer. In terms of price, I mean, there's really no camera that comes in comparison to the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro in its price. So because of that, you got to give that to the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro. Overall, I think Blackmagic has really made a lot of improvements with the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro, addressing a lot of concerns that many of us had. With the addition of built-in NDs, a very beautiful tiltable screen that allows us to view it at so many different angles, and a slightly better in battery life, we got a really better, robust camera that really, at its price point, there really is no competition. Right now, I'm recording on the R5, and I love the R5, but if I didn't have the R5 and I had to choose between the R5 and the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro, the answer is the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro. The codecs are really great to work with. You still got a high resolution with 6K. Yes, it's Super 35, but it really lets you want that full frame. You know, it's not that big of a deal. I love working with Super 35, and it's just got so much more video-centric features. But I will say this: if you have the ability to really put your budget up and go a little bit harder, I say the C70 to me is just the clear winner of a cinema camera. While yes, there's a lot of things that the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K has came up to compete with it, especially at a price at half the cost, the C70 is still overall to me a more definitively better camera. It has better dynamic range. The image quality holds up to 12-bit RAW. It has much better ergonomics, like way better ergonomics, autofocus, digital IS. You have the ability of an RF mount where you can get way more lens options. The list goes on and on. The battery life kills the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. And you got a package like small as this that literally can, like a package like this, you can literally go from gimbal, handheld, sticks with almost no adjustments whatsoever. So because of that, to me, the winner is, in this case, the C70. Just because Canon has really came up on its image quality. This sensor is just beautiful. But this is still a wonderful, great camera. Oh boy, I know I'm gonna have a lot of comments and people saying stuff in the comments today, but I definitely want to hear from you guys, so let me know what you guys think. Let me know, leave your comments below, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and until next time, take care everyone.